The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Amarillo, Texas, in the summer of 1847. The air was thick with the smell of cattle and unwashed bodies as townsfolk gathered around the makeshift auction platform. Among the items being sold that day, tools, livestock, and confiscated property, stood a young woman named Eleanor Whitfield. At 23, Eleanor's once pristine dress was now torn and stained, her auburn hair tangled from weeks of neglect. Her father's gambling debts had led to this moment. After his death, the creditors had claimed everything, including her done in the harsh reality of frontier Texas, where law was often what men with guns said it was. She found herself being sold to settle accounts. "Gentlemen, we have here a healthy female, educated back east, can read and write." The auctioneer bellowed, his voice carrying over the murmuring crowd. "A perfect for household duties or clerking. Strong constitution, no visible defects." Eleanor kept her chin high, despite the humiliation burning through her veins. Her green eyes scanned the crowd of leering men, some appraising her like livestock, others with darker intentions written across their faces. She recognized several merchants who had smiled at her father just months ago, now ready to bid on his daughter like property. "Starting bid at $50. The crowd stirred. A heavy-set man in a stained vest raised his hand. "50. 60, called another from the back. Eleanor's hands trembled as she gripped the rough wooden rail. She had heard whispers of what happened to women sold this way. Brothels in San Antonio, isolated ranches where they disappeared forever, or worse. Her mother had died believing their family would prosper in Texas. Now Eleanor stood on an auction block, her dignity stripped away piece by piece with each bid. $75. The saloon owner, Marcus Webb, pushed forward. His reputation for cruelty was well known, and Eleanor's blood ran cold. "80, countered another voice. As the bidding continued, Eleanor noticed a figure standing apart from the crowd. A tall man leaned against the hitching post, his weathered face partially hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Unlike the others, he watched without expression, his dark eyes taking in the scene with what seemed like distaste. His clothes marked him as a rancher, quality leather boots, clean denim, a well-maintained Colt revolver at his hip. $100 from Mr. Webb. Do I hear 110? The crowd grew excited. This was more entertainment than Amarillo had seen in months. Eleanor felt her knees weaken. Webb was already grinning, confident in his victory. 110, going once. The silent rancher straightened slightly, his movement barely perceptible. Going twice. Eleanor closed, her eyes preparing for the inevitable. $200. The deep voice cut through the air like a knife. Every head turned toward the hitching post. The rancher had spoken, his first and only bid doubling Webb's offer. The auctioneer's hammer fell with finality. "Sold to Mr. Samuel Hayes for $200. Webb's face contorted with rage, but he knew better than to challenge Sam Hayes. The man's reputation preceded him, a former Texas Ranger who'd settled a vast ranch 40 miles north of Amarillo after the Mexican War. Fair, but formidable. Hayes was known for his marksmanship and his peculiar habit of treating his workers, regardless of color or origin, with uncommon respect. Eleanor found herself being led off the platform toward her new owner. Hayes approached slowly, removing his hat as he drew near. Up close, she could see the lines etched deep around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, with the bearing of a man who'd seen too much violence and chosen a different path. "Miss Whitfield," he said quietly, his voice carrying a slight Tennessee drawl, "I apologize for the circumstances. My wagon's outside. We have a long ride ahead." She searched his face for signs of deception or cruelty, but found only a weary kindness. Still, she kept her guard up. "Where are you taking me?" The Double H Ranch. You'll work there, but not as you might. Fear. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I need someone who can read and write, help with the ranch accounts. My foreman's been struggling with the book since my wife. He trailed off, a shadow crossing his features. The ride north took them through vast stretches of prairie grass and mesquite. Hayes drove the wagon himself, while Eleanor sat beside him, acutely aware of every bump and jostle. Neither spoke for the first hour, the only sounds coming from the creaking wheels and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. Finally, Eleanor broke the silence. Why did you buy me? Hayes kept his eyes on the horizon. Couldn't stand to see Webb get his hands on another girl. Lost too many to men. Like him already. So you're my savior. The bitterness in her voice was sharp. No, ma'am. Just a man who needs help and figured we could come to a fair arrangement. You work for me for 1 year. I'll pay you proper wages on top of clearing your father's remaining debts. After that, you're free to go wherever you please. With enough money to start fresh. Eleanor studied him suspiciously. And if I refuse, then I'll take you back to town right now and you can figure your own way. But we both know what waits for you there. She fell silent, recognizing the truth in his words. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the Double H Ranch came into view. It was larger than she'd expected. A main house built of stone and timber, several outbuildings, corrals filled with horses, and cattle dotting the distant hills. Welcome to your new home, temporary as it may be, Hayes said, pulling up to the main house. A small group of workers had gathered, curious about their boss's return. Eleanor noticed immediately that Hayes employed a diverse crew, Mexican vaqueros, a Chinese cook, 2 black freedmen, and several white cowboys. They all seemed to regard Hayes with genuine respect rather than fear. Chen, Hayes called to the cookie. Please prepare the guest room in the main house. Miss Whitfield will be staying with us. The cook nodded and hurried inside. A young Mexican woman approached, her face kind but wary. Senor Hayes, should I prepare a bath? If Miss Whitfield would like one, Rosa. She's had a trying day. Eleanor felt tears threaten for the first time since the auction. The simple kindness of a bath, a bed, being asked what she would like. It was almost too much after weeks of degradation. Thank you, she managed. As Rosa led her inside, Eleanor caught a glimpse of Hayes speaking quietly with his foreman, a grizzled man with kind eyes. She heard only fragments. Treat her with respect. Been through enough. Anyone gives her trouble answers. To me, the house interior was simple but clean, with photographs on the mantel and books lining one wall. Eleanor paused at one photograph, a beautiful woman with gentle eyes and a small boy on her lap. Senora Hayes, Rosa said softly, following her gaze. She died 2 winters ago. The fever took her and the little one. Senor Hayes, he has not been the same since. That night, after a hot bath and a simple but filling meal, Eleanor lay in a real bed for the first time in weeks. Through her window, she could see Hayes sitting on the porch, silhouetted against the stars, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. She wondered what kind of man paid $200, a fortune in these parts, to save a stranger from a terrible fate, asking only for honest work in return. Perhaps, she thought, as sleep finally claimed her, not all of Texas was as cruel as she'd come to believe. But trust would not come easily. The frontier had taught her that kindness often came with a price, and she would wait to see what Sam Hayes truly expected in return for his generosity. 6 months had passed since Eleanor arrived at the Double H Ranch. The autumn of 1847 brought cooler winds across the Texas plains, and with them a transformation in the young woman who'd once stood on an auction block. Her hands once soft from a life of relative comfort, now bore the calluses of honest work. But more than that, she'd found something she'd never expected: purpose. The ranch office had become her domain. Years of financial neglect had left the books in chaos, but Eleanor's education served her well. She discovered discrepancies, recovered lost funds, and implemented a system that even the skeptical foreman, Jake Morrison, admitted was damn near miraculous. "You've saved us nearly $300 this month alone," Hayes told her one evening as they reviewed the ledgers together. The lamplight flickered between them, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "At this rate, the ranch will be more profitable than it's been since your wife passed," Eleanor finished gently. They'd grown comfortable enough for such directness. Hayes nodded, his fingers absently turning his wedding ring. "Margaret had a head for numbers too. I never learned properly myself. Too many years chasing bandits and Comanche raiders." Their working relationship had evolved into something resembling friendship, though boundaries remained carefully maintained. Eleanor took her meals with the family. Hayes and his workers ate together, another peculiarity that set him apart from other ranchers. She'd learned their stories. Chen had fled California's goldfields after violent discrimination. The Freedmen brothers, Joseph and William, had walked from Louisiana seeking honest work, and Rosa had lost her husband in the Mexican War. One November morning, trouble arrived in the form of Marcus Webb and 5 armed men. Eleanor was in the barn checking inventory when she heard the horses approach. Her blood froze as she recognized Webb's voice. "Hayes, I've come to discuss a business proposition." She peered through the barn slats as Hayes emerged from the main house, his gun belt already buckled. Jake and several hands flanked him, rifles visible but not raised. "State your business, Webb, then get off my land." Webb's smile was predatory. Now, Sam, is that any way to treat a neighbor? I've come about the girl. My offer stands. $300. That's 100 profit for just 6 months. Trouble. Miss Whitfield is not for sale. Everything's for sale. Hayes, even your misplaced nobility. Webb's hand drifted toward his pistol. I've been patient as Mom, but my customers are asking for her specifically. Seems word of her beauty has spread. Eleanor's hands shook as she gripped a pitchfork. She'd known this day might come, but had hoped Hayes's reputation would keep the wolves at bay. "The lady works for me of her own free will," Hayes said, his voice deadly calm. "She's under my protection. You do well to remember that." "Your protection?" Webb laughed. "You think playing house with a bought woman makes you noble. Everyone knows why you really keep her here." The insult hung in the air like gunpowder waiting for a spark. Eleanor saw Hayes's jaw tighten, his hand steady near his Colt. "Choose your next words carefully, Webb." "Or what? You'll gun down 6 men. Even the great Sam Hayes can't—" The shot came from behind Eleanor. She spun to find Chen, holding an old shotgun, smoke rising from one barrel. He'd fired into the air, but the message was clear. Joseph and William emerged from the other barn, rifles trained on Webb's men. Rosa appeared on the house's upper balcony, a repeating rifle in her hands. "Seems the odds have changed," Jake drawled, spitting tobacco juice near Webb's horse. Webb's face purpled with rage, but he recognized defeat. "This isn't over, Hayes. That girl's daddy owed debts all over the territory. Others will come collecting." "Let them come," Hayes replied. "Now get off my land before my people decide you're trespassing." After Webb's departure, Eleanor emerged from the barn, her legs unsteady. Hayes noticed her immediately. "You all right?" "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why protect me? You could have made a profit." Hayes holstered his gun with practiced ease. "My wife used to say that a man's worth isn't measured in what he owns, but in what he's willing to defend. You're not property, Eleanor. You're a person under my protection, and that means something at the Double H." That night, the Ranch hands gathered for dinner as usual, but the atmosphere was different. Eleanor realized that somewhere in the past months, she'd become part of this unlikely family. Chen fussed over her, insisting she eat more. Joseph regaled them with stories of his childhood in Georgia. Rosa taught her Spanish curse words that made the vaqueros roar with laughter. "You all risked your lives today," Eleanor said suddenly, silencing the table. "For me, I don't know how to thank you." "No thanks needed, señorita," one of the vaqueros, Miguel, said simply. "Senor Hayes took us in when no one else would. We protect our own." Hayes raised his coffee cup. "To family found in the strangest places." As they toasted, Eleanor felt tears on her cheeks. For the first time since her father's death. And she belonged somewhere. The Double H wasn't just a refuge, it had become home, but Webb's threat lingered. Other creditors would come, and the fragile peace she'd found remained vulnerable. That night, she made a decision. If these people would fight for her, she would fight for them. The frontier had taken everything from her once. She wouldn't let it happen again. Standing at her window, watching Hayes make his nightly rounds, she whispered a promise to the stars. "I'll earn this, all of it. Whatever comes next, I'll be ready." Spring arrived early in 1848, bringing with it wild flowers that carpeted the Texas plains in brilliant purples and yellows. Eleanor had been at the Double H for nearly a year, and the ranch had flourished under her careful management. But change was coming. Her contracted year was almost up, and decisions loomed on the horizon. The first sign of trouble came with a letter delivered by a nervous rider. Eleanor recognized the legal seal immediately. Judge Cornelius Blackwood from Austin, the same man who'd authorized her sale to settle her father's debts. Hayes read it aloud in the office, his face darkening with each word. "Says here that irregularities have been found in your father's estate settlement. Claims there are additional creditors, and that your sale was insufficient to cover all debts." "That's impossible," Eleanor said, though her heart sank. "I saw the ledgers myself before." "It's Webb," Hayes interrupted. "Has to be. Blackwood's in his pocket." The letter demanded Eleanor's immediate return to Austin for a new assessment of obligations. The implied threat was clear: comply or face legal consequences that would extend to anyone harboring her. "I won't let you go," Hayes said firmly. "You may not have a choice." Eleanor's mind raced. "If they bring federal marshals, then we'll deal with that when it comes." He stood, pacing to the window. "I've sent Jake to Fort Worth. My old ranger captain is there, might be able to help." 3 days later, their worst fears materialized. Judge Blackwood himself arrived with a contingent of armed men, including 2 federal marshals. Webb rode beside them, his satisfaction evident. The ranch hands gathered as the official party approached. Eleanor stood on the porch between Hayes and Chen, trying to still her trembling hands. "Samuel Hayes," Blackwood intoned from his horse, "you are harboring a fugitive debtor. Surrender the woman immediately or face charges of obstruction." "I'd like to see the legal documentation," Hayes replied calmly. Blackwood produced a sheaf of papers. "New creditors have come forward. Miss Whitfield's sale price was insufficient. She must return to settle remaining debts." "And who are these creditors?" Eleanor stepped forward, finding her voice. "That's not your concern, woman." "I'd say it is," a new voice called out. Jake Morrison rode up with 3 men in tow, Texas Rangers, their badges glinting in the sun. The lead rider, a graying captain named Tom Bedford, tipped his hat to Hayes. "Sam, got your message. Thought we'd look into these supposed debts." Bedford's eyes were cold as they surveyed Blackwood. "Funny thing, we've been investigating Judge Blackwood here for falsifying documents. Seems he's been declaring fake debts to sell free people into bondage, splitting profits with certain saloon owners." Webb's hand went to his gun, but found 3 Ranger rifles already trained on him. "That's slander," Blackwood sputtered. "Is it?" Bedford produced his own papers. "We have sworn statements from 6 other victims, Judge. Women sold to settle mysterious debts that appeared after their male relatives died. All traced." "Back to you and Mr. Webb." The federal marshals exchanged glances, slowly backing their horses away from Blackwood. "Moreover," Bedford continued, "Miss Whitfield's original sale was illegal. Texas law requires a proper hearing before any free person can be sold for debt. You bypass that, Judge, makes her sale void and you guilty of human trafficking." Eleanor felt her knees weaken with relief. Hayes's hand steadied her elbow, and his touch gentle but grounding. "You can't prove any of this," Webb shouted, but his voice cracked with desperation. "Actually, we can," Eleanor said, surprising everyone. "I've kept detailed records of every transaction, every document. And last month, I found something interesting in the ranch's old files, a letter from my father to Mr. Hayes, dated 2 days before his death." Hayes looked at her in surprise. She'd never mentioned this. Eleanor continued, "In it, he expressed fears that Webb was planning to kill him over a poker dispute. He asked Mr. Hayes to look after me if anything happened. That letter, combined with the suspicious timing of these new deaths, is enough for a murder investigation," Bedford finished. "Webb, Blackwood, you're both under arrest." The next moments were chaos. Webb went for his gun, but was quickly disarmed. Blackwood tried to flee, but was caught by Joseph and William, who seemed to take particular satisfaction in restraining the judge who'd sold so many into bondage. As the Rangers led the conspirators away, Bedford turned to Eleanor. "Ma'am, you're free. Any debts against your name are void. The state of Texas owes you an apology. And compensation," Hayes added firmly. "She was sold illegally and suffered for it. That'll be for the courts to decide, but I reckon she has a strong case." Bedford tipped his hat. "Sam, good to see you again. Try to stay out of trouble." As the dust settled and the ranch returned to calm, Eleanor found herself alone with Hayes on the porch. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, reminding her of that first evening when he'd brought her here. "You found a letter from my father?" Hayes asked softly. Eleanor smiled. "No, but Webb didn't know that. Sometimes the best weapon is letting evil men's guilt fill in the blanks." Hayes laughed, a genuine sound she'd rarely heard. "You've learned well. Margaret would have liked you." "Your year is up next week," he said after a pause. "You're free to go, and with the compensation from the state, you'll have means to start anywhere." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, watching the ranch hands go about their evening routines. Chen was arguing with Rosa about dinner preparations. The vaqueros were bringing in the horses. Joseph was teaching William to play harmonica. "What if I don't want to go?" she asked finally. Hayes turned to her, hope flickering in his eyes. "The ranch could always use a good manager, but Eleanor, I need you to know I never expected, that is, any feelings I might have developed." She placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. "Sam Hayes, you bought my freedom when you thought you were buying a servant. You gave me dignity when the world tried to strip it away. You protected me without asking for anything in return. If you're trying to say you've come to care for me, know that the feeling is mutual." "It wouldn't be proper," he said, though his hand covered hers. "Oh, people would talk. Say I bought myself a wife." "Let them talk," Eleanor replied firmly. "I've learned that the opinion of cruel people matters less than the respect of good ones. And everyone on this ranch knows the truth." A year later, the Double H Ranch celebrated its most joyful event since Margaret Hayes's passing. Eleanor Whitfield married Samuel Hayes in a ceremony attended by rangers, ranch hands, and the growing community of freed people and immigrants who'd found sanctuary on their land. Judge Blackwood was serving 20 years in prison. Webb had been hanged for the murders of 3 women and Eleanor's father. The compensation from the state had been used to expand the ranch and create a fund for other women who'd been illegally sold. As Eleanor stood beside her husband, watching their mixed family of outcasts and survivors dance under the stars, she thought about the auction block that had brought her here. What had begun as her darkest moment had led to her brightest. "No regrets?" Sam asked, pulling her close. "None," she said, meaning it. "Sometimes the worst roads lead to the best destinations." The music played on, a mixture of Mexican guitars, Chinese drums, and American fiddles, the sound of the new Texas they were building together, one where justice could prevail and love could bloom, even in the harshest soil.